The Phoenix Suns just got a 7'2", highly skilled 23-year-old Bol Bol on a minimum contract. And getting a guy that can do all of this at his size just doesn't seem fair for a team that already has a ton of talent. I mean, just look at the handle in the open court, the body control, the ability to get through guys, finishing at the rim. You should not be able to get this level of skill on a minimum contract. But the question today is Bol Bol actually good? Why was he, despite his talent, his potential, his age, so available around the league right after a breakout season in Orlando? Well, let's start with the positives. If you just showed someone a highlight tape of Bol Bol from last season on the Magic and they didn't really know that much about the NBA, they might be thinking that they were watching the best player in the entire league pull up threes in transition and in the half court, getting to his spot in the mid-range, shooting over taller defenders. It's 7'2". Like, this kind of stuff is not supposed to be possible, and it looks awfully familiar to that Victor Wembanyama, that Chet Holmgren archetype, especially offensively, of the 7-foot-plus guy with guard skills. And of course, because of that length, he's going to be a factor defensively. DeMar DeRozan tries to get to the rim here. That gets blocked. Next up, we've got Jalen Brunson, his typical footwork in the lane, trying to draw a foul. Nothing happens. That gets sent away as well. Trae Young gets to the baseline. Paolo with awful defense here, but it doesn't matter because Bol Bol is there. That's what you want from a big guy. You want someone that is going to make up for the mistakes of other players. But this right here is more intriguing to me. This is that Chet, that Wembanyama thing where, yeah, maybe he gets beat a little bit by some of these guards, by some of these smaller players, but he has the length to make up for it. Gets into a step back, creates space. The space is now gone because of that incredible length. And I'm also intrigued by this skill as well. Bol Bol blocks a lot of threes. Like, he'll get beat on certain stuff, or he'll just be there with his hand up and get a piece of a lot of three-point shots. Now, there are still going to be some mistakes. This one's pretty funny right here, just a miscommunication, but you have to remember that he's 23 years old, and from a raw athleticism and potential standpoint, there's a lot of good stuff to like for Bol Bol in terms of his rim protection and his length. However, this is where the issues start to pop up for Bol Bol. Remember all those really awesome clips that I showed you in the beginning of the video, hitting threes in transition, getting to his spot in the mid-range, the great handles? For every one of those clips, I could show you between 5 and 10 clips of just awful play from this guy. Dribbling the ball off his foot, taking terrible shots. And maybe even more significant than that is there is a real confusion about what kind of player he is. When you look at the numbers from last year, he played the large majority of his minutes at the 4 spot alongside another big, and he was one of the better at-rim finishers in the league amongst 4s, which makes total sense because he's gigantic. He caught a lot of lobs, he was a good vertical threat, he could dunk the ball at the rim, he's just going to finish over a lot of guys. However, his shot distribution shows us a player that doesn't really want to be an at-rim finisher. He took less than half of his shots last year at the rim, took almost 40% of his shots in the mid-range, and almost a quarter of his shots were from three-point range. And as you go down through the shot distribution, he gets worse and worse at each of these shots. He's a really good at-rim finisher, he's an okay to kind of bad mid-range shooter, and he's a terrible three-point shooter. 26.5% from threes on over 1.5 attempts per game last year, and more importantly, 18% on corner threes last year. Think about the shots that Bol Bol is going to be getting ideally within this Phoenix offense. It's going to be a lot of spot ups, and it's going to be a lot of stuff at the rim. The at-rim stuff is going to be good if he wants to do it. If you're an 18% three-point shooter from the corners and you're not a full-time 5, you're not going to play for this Suns team. And ironically, because he's going to Phoenix, I think Bol Bol thinks that he's Kevin Durant. I think he thinks it because he has some offensive skill and because he's tall. He's a great isolation scorer individually at the NBA level, and he's just not. And until that mindset shifts and changes and he leans more into the things that he's good at, which is at rim finishing and protecting the rim and becoming a better three-point shooter overall, he's going to continue to have issues making it and sticking around in the NBA. And what makes it even worse is the amount of times he turns the ball over and how low his assist numbers are. He had 69 nice assists in 70 games last year. This is one of those 69 assists. They counted this as an assist, and he still had less than 1 per game. He's not a good passer. He's not all that willing of a passer. And he's going to have some of these weird, crazy turnovers when he tries to get into his Bol Bol bag. And this kind of stuff is just not going to work within what Phoenix wants to do. They want to be incredibly efficient offensively. They want to get a good shot down the floor every single time. They want to get good three-point shooters, great three-point looks. And Bol Bol doesn't do any of that stuff. He doesn't move the ball. He takes bad mid-rangers. He turns the ball over, and he's not a good three-point shooter. But all these numbers are coming from his situation in Orlando last year, which is much different than what he's going to be experiencing in Phoenix this year. So to answer the question of the video, is Bol Bol actually good? Not right now, but he can be. This is actually a really intriguing opportunity for him as well as for Phoenix. He's still so young. He's barely played in the NBA at all because of injury issues in the beginning of his career, as well as just not getting on the floor in general. And there's a skill set here that can be unbelievably valuable for Phoenix. Step one for Bol Bol, he has to be a better three-point shooter, and he has to get rid of all of the crazy mid-range stuff, trying to go into his Bol Bol bag and turning the ball over. He's got to get rid of all of that. If he can just become a 35% three-point shooter, a good catch and shoot shooter, someone that can hit close to 40% of their corner threes, if he can do that, he's going to be a playoff rotation player for Phoenix, because every time we talk about this Suns team, they need one thing. Yes, they need defense, they need guys that can shoot, they need a rotation, they need all that. However, they need one thing, and that is the fifth guy in the starting lineup. They've got Beal, Booker, Durant, Ayton. Who's the fifth guy going to be? And I think that Bol Bol could be that fifth guy. Now, not based off of anything that we saw from him last year, but based off what he could be within this Phoenix system. If you put him out there alongside the 3 stars and Ayton, suddenly you've got a group that could potentially survive together. If he can be a good three-point shooter, which I believe that he can, and he's willing to play off the ball and space the floor, hit, catch, and shoot jumpers, him alongside DeAndre Ayton, with each of their abilities to move their feet and stay with some of these smaller players defensively, you're not going to switch a ton with them, but they can at least stay in front if they need to. That provides them somewhat of a defensive backbone in terms of the rim protection collectively of those two players, in addition to, of course, Kevin Durant being out there. And having that big of a front court, KD, Bol Bol, Ayton, all together, assuming that the spacing is there with Bol Bol, is really intriguing. And then, of course, you have all the offense in the world with the other 2 guards. That's what Phoenix needs. They need someone that ties their defense together, they can make up for mistakes elsewhere, and that can space the floor offensively. And Bol Bol can be that guy with some major improvements, which all sounds really cool and exciting, but really it comes down to that mindset that I talked about. Bol Bol has the skills to be a playoff player for Phoenix. He has the skills to be potentially the missing piece for this Suns team. Talent has never been the question. Athleticism has never been the question. Physical profile has never been the question. He has to change his mindset. He can be good, but he's not going to be Kevin Durant. He's not going to be Kevin Garnett even. He's not going to be any kind of outstanding offensive player individually. At this point in his career, we know that. However, he can be a really high-level complementary player in kind of that role of Chet that I've talked about in previous videos, a little bit like Wembanyama that we've talked about before. He's not going to be those level of guys in terms of their overall upside, but in terms of someone that brings the whole team together, he can be that guy. And when you put all that together, I'm super excited to see what this looks like in Phoenix. He might not play at all. He might be a key rotation player for them, but we're finally going to find out this year, after all the hype, after all the potential, is Bol Bol actually a good basketball player? And I cannot wait to find out.